Hello guys, it's the Caribbean Bookworm, and today I'll be giving you a review for the fourth book in the Dark Tower series, and that is The Wizard and Glass, written by Stephen King. This review is going to be, in some sense, both a non-spoiler and a spoiler review. We're going to start at first with the non-spoiler bits, and at this particular timestamp, you will dive into the more spoilery territory of things. So this is basically just a disclaimer and a heads up. So The Wizard and Glass, without giving too much context, follows directly after the events of the third book. For those who have read the third book ended on a cliffhanger without mentioning any particular detail and spoilers. And afterwards, Roland and his ka-tet end up in a new destination, and in this destination they manage to get some time to lay low, and Roland gets the chance to actually tell his comrades where he came from, or at least what basically made him the man that he is at this moment, and why he is so hard set on finding the Dark Tower. Without giving any spoilers, that's basically where this book takes off, and basically it gives you a bit of the origin story of the gunslinger. Well, further details will be left for the spoilery section, but to jump into the pros and the cons section of the book, we will start with the pros. Some of the pros I have with the book are, for example, that firstly, I find that a lot of new characters are written and described in very interesting and engaging manners, especially characters that the gunslinger encountered in his past within this particular big flashback scenes that happen. Some very peculiar characters that, even though they're not in the present, they still leave an everlasting imprint on you. Another pro that I have with this book is part of what I mentioned there in the beginning of the video, and that is Roland's character is more developed throughout this book, and I can see it is definitely a main purpose of the book as well, because if you read the series up to this point, you heard a lot of complaints from people going on that Roland is a very cold and stoic character, especially in the first book, and that's why he is a very morally confusing character, and people don't know whether or not they should root for him. But in this book, you do get where that comes from and why he is so cold, stoic, and hard set. You get to see that, and you get to see that he does indeed have a more human side to him as well. And I think that was very nicely flashed out throughout this particular book. The last pro I have with this book is that this book gets things going. What I mean by that is you actually, by the end of it, you actually know in what direction Roland and the ka-tet is going, and what is actually in store from them in terms of finding the Dark Tower. You get to see basically why certain things are happening, and some of the more weirder concepts from the previous books start to actually make more sense, and even the concepts of traveling through different worlds and such are more fleshed out throughout this book. Before going on to the spoilery bit of this book review, I would just want to mention one con that I had with the book, and that is very apparent by the book's physical stature as well, and that is the book can feel quite lengthy. And that is, of course, no big new news about Stephen King books, but this one does, you do tend to feel like that it's basically dragging. And that is not only because it's a very long book, but it is also because a lot of the time the book is placed within the past, like Roland telling his backstory, and that is one thing that you do need to be aware of once you're getting into this book, because I wish I was a bit more aware of that. I purposely wanted to stay away from reviews because a lot of them were spoilery reviews, but it is one thing to keep in mind that the book can feel quite lengthy because a lot of it is in flashback. And now on to the spoilery bit of this review. One thing I have to mention at first about this is that I found a particular new character, and that was Rhea of the Coos, to be a particularly creepy character, the witch. She was described as this typical Wizard of Oz type of witch, but in a rather more adultish, creepy manner. It was very descriptive, and you could see how basically her looking within this wizard's glass kind of sucked, how that basically kind of sucked the life out of the witch and basically physically changed her and made her even more of a monstrous thing as the book progressed, as the story progressed, as she continued to use the crystal ball thing. And this character meant nothing but chaos. There is not one portion of the book in which you feel like this character might be of a benevolent age. She always had this more sinister intention with what she was doing, and it makes you wonder that basically what is it with Roland and his luck, his bad luck at least with witches. I remember reading about her as well very briefly, but she did play a role within another Stephen King novel, and that was The Eyes of the Dragon, one of the very early Stephen King novels I read. I don't even remember the story very clearly, but I do remember Rhea playing a role, and this does make me want to read that book again at some point, perhaps when I finish the series, as I really want to refresh my mind with that particular character, and as well as another character that is within this novel. Another point that I wanted to mention that I didn't mention within the non-spoilery section is that I did really like the fact that Roland's basically whole life was filled with tragedy, and that sounds like a very pessimistic thing, but what I mean by that, as like in this more of a positive sense, is that it makes sense why this really hardcore stoic character that we've met in the Gunslinger is so hard back and set on finding Wu the Tower at all cost, because basically what he's seen with his mother, what he's been through with Susan, and just everything else that has happened, basically he's seen a lot at a very young age, and that basically left him scarred for life. And that basically ties into what Eddie in the book constantly tells him, that hey, you're not all right. Like, he's not, like, Roland is not 100% stable because he has seen so much, basically. So I think it made sense for this character to have a really tragic backstory, and for him to, his last glimmer of hope for a normal life, you could say, was with Susan Delgado, and that got stripped away eventually as well. Speaking of Roland's tragedy, a character that plays a really important part with Roland's tragedy is the character of Martin, the wizard from Gilead, or at least that's what he thinks at first, but then he slowly uncovers and realizes that not only Martin was that, but Martin was also in present day throughout their quest as they were heading onwards. Basically, what happened after the Wastelands is that Roland and his ka-tet ended in the world of the Stand, and that I found to be a really nice heads up to basically people who have read the Stand. And I think even if you haven't read the Stand, it will be a really nice thing to kind of make you want to read the Stand. Like, you just get these glimpses of the story about mentions of this old woman east in Nebraska and this dark man in the west in Las Vegas. And if you've read The Stand, that just has all the good feels about that book, in the best creepy sense possible. And you also just continue to see these references to the dark man, which you know in The Stand is Randall Flagg, and they mention it in this book as well, since at the end the character does appear in his The Stand form. Like, he appears as Randall Flagg to Roland and his group, and he basically threatens them to stop following towards this quest to the tower, and that leaves you very curious to see what happens next, how they encounter Walter, Martin, or Randall Flagg, as you know that they're going to encounter him more frequently, and that he's going to be a main player or a main force of resistance to their quest to the tower. So I did find that tie into The Stand and basically elaborate as to how Martin, or the Man in Black, basically played a very crucial role in Roland's life. I like that the backstory basically highlighted that, and also that the glass that Roland has basically showed him kind of what his quest towards the tower is meant to be. It's basically destined to follow this particular path at whatever cost, and in one way or another, he wasn't meant to be with Susan. In either way, it was really dark, but necessary for this character. So all in all, that was my review for Wizard and Glass. I found it to be very interesting. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads, but in all reality, I would probably give it about a 3.5 out of 5. All in all, because it wasn't a bad book. It was a very interesting book, but it was a slow burner, and in particular because of the flashbacks. There were a lot of flashbacks. I think too much flashbacks for my taste. But I did really like the fact that it flashed out Roland a bit more. We got to know a bit more about the world as per usual, usual with the Dark Tower, and you also have this sense of intrigue, which is fascinating. And also, I'm a sucker for the antagonist that we have so far, which is Martin, or the Man in Black, the Dark Man, Randall Flagg, whatever you want to call him. I really like him, and I like the fact that we're starting to see more and more of these antagonists as well. So yeah, that was my review for Wizard and Glass, and I hope you enjoyed the review. And let me know what you thought of Wizard and Glass as well if you've read the book. See you guys soon, hopefully, and bye.